Okay, so my first proper video. What should we talk about? Well, the approach to dealing with the cancer has been focused mainly initially on the food that I was eating. So cutting out all the rubbish that I used to eat, and smoothies and juicing. But it doesn't matter how much of these you do, if you don't take care of what's going on in your mind. Even the best of Gerson therapies will be of no avail. So what happens? Well, we have our being in a field of energy. This is no longer a fancy or a fantasy. It's been shown with electronic equipment and experimental data derived from the Hadron Collider and whatever else they've got going on in CERN. So we have our being in a field of energy. That means your mind is energy, the ideas that go through it are energy, your emotions are energy, and your physical body is energy. Hard to think, isn't it? This physical body is energy. What's stopping my finger from going in there? The field which surrounds the flesh is stopping, it's resisting the penetration of my finger to go through it. So, if we live in a field of energy, we have to then just decide, is it going to be, is it intelligent? Well, is it intelligent? We see intelligence everywhere we look. We see it in the way a plant reaches towards the light. We see it with birds, how they use tools to perform certain functions. And certainly in dolphins there's a display of intelligence there. And there's even intelligence in some human beings. So this tells us that even in potential there is intelligence in the field of power. I say it's a field of power. Jesus called it God. I prefer to call it absolute sentient power. Absolute because there is nowhere where it isn't. Sentient because it feels the results of the action that it performs using its power. This underlies all of our lives. It's the basis of life itself, absolute sentient power. So he was around 2,000 years ago, this chap, and one of the greatest teachings that he gave was that of forgiveness. People like to imagine that it's something to do with just believe what he says and all your sins will be forgiven. It's not that easy. What he did actually say was, and it's written in several places in the script, in the text, that he came that we might have the forgiveness of sins. That's the capacity to forgive sins. And this is one of the biggest things that you can do to help yourself out of any illness. He was the greatest healer the world has ever seen. So one of the things that he taught almost incessantly was the forgiveness of sins. So why is it important to forgive sins? And what is sin? Well, sin is missing the mark. When people treat you unfairly, you might think they're missing the mark. They may or they may not. But you may hold a grudge against them. If somebody pushes in front of you in the traffic when you're driving down the road, you might scream intolerantly at the way they abuse your space. Well, that's not much of a thing to forgive, is it, compared to somebody who's hanging on the cross suffering dreadful pain, when he says forgive them for they know not what they do. And these people who barge into you in front of you in the traffic, they're somewhere else. They're not that they have something important to go to, something obviously more important than you. So it's a policy to forgive Not to forgive and forget. Forgive and remember. Remembering is as important as forgiving. So why is forgiveness important? Because every idea that goes through your mind has an effect on the gross material body. We live in a universe of energy, as I've already said, and this means that the energy in the brain or in the mind can affect the energy in the emotional body, and the emotional body can affect the gross material body. This was shown most significantly for me when a friend of mine, who one of his favourite sayings was, "They're a pain in the arse." He developed subsequently hemorrhoids, which later turned into cancerous growth. The cancerous growth meant that he had his anus removed. He wore a bag. He was also treated with chemotherapy, which toxified him even more. The cancer spread to his bones. He was treated with radiotherapy, and in the space of 2 years he went from a lively, friendly, outgoing chap to somebody that's passed away. So how does this happen? How does what you have in the mind affect the body? Well, it's fairly plain to see, looking back in retrospect, plain to see how it affected my friend. It may not be so easy to see how the ideas in your mind affect the body in other cases. So every idea in your mind, even the idea of hatred, every idea has its favourite place in the body. So when you hate somebody, you are not actually hating that other person. He may be totally unaware of what you're hating, but you have an idea in your mind which has its favourite place in the body, so that hatred will be pushed down into that place and affect your body negatively. We've seen how when you looking forward with trepidation to some event that's coming up, you might get butterflies in your stomach. There can't be many people who haven't felt that in some form or other. But the emotional body has an equally toxic effect, and I believe it probably works through the glandular system, the endocrine glands, releasing all sorts of hormones which do diabolical damage to the body, to that part of the body where the idea is situated. So the hatred you're directing towards this imaginary character in your mind is directed towards this place in your body. So forgiveness of sins is forgiveness of anything you believe others have wronged. The most difficult person to forgive, of course, is oneself. And that's something we also need to focus on, because have you ever, sometimes I think of something like a past event where I can physically groan at the memory of it, as if it's still affecting me. So these are the kinds of things that you need to forgive. Anything that you imagine you've done wrong in the past, anybody, or anything that somebody else has told you is evil or bad or wrong. You need to have a close look at that and realise that we're just lives being lived as best we can, to the best of our ability. So forgiveness of sins is for me, has been the most significant aspect of my return to health. Thank you.